Hello everybody, this vlog is part 2 of a talk about the tax treatment of payments to bring leases to an early end, either by surrender, a mutual agreement between landlord and tenant to end the lease in spite of the tenant's contractual commitments under the lease, or by the tenant exercising a break option, which is a contractual right already in the lease, enabling it to end the lease on notice to its landlord. In part 1, I talked about VAT issues. In this part 2, I'll do SDLT, stamp duty, land tax, and briefly other tax treatment. So a lease is a chargeable interest for SDLT and for Welsh land transaction tax for properties in Wales. Where a lease is surrendered, the landlord acquires the surrendered chargeable interest. It therefore enters into a land transaction, the landlord enters into the land transaction, which may attract SDLT. So the landlord can be subject to SDLT on the chargeable consideration that it provides for the surrender. Now, it's quite rare for the landlord to pay a tenant a surrender premium where you have a one-off surrender. That classic surrender is usually as a result of the tenant coming cap in hand to the landlord saying it wants to be released early. The landlord wouldn't be paying the tenant anything usually in that scenario. But it might be the case that a landlord would buy off a tenant to get a better deal, to enhance its investment with another tenant, and a landlord would definitely be paying a consideration where it was taking a surrender of a long lease, subject to underleases, effectively acquiring an investment from its long leaseholder. In those cases, the rules are as follows. Now, they're a bit quirky and particular, and the landlord will need to file an SDLT return and pay any SDLT due where either the lease was originally granted for a term of less than 7 years and the chargeable consideration exceeds the zero rate threshold, meaning that the SDLT is due on part of the consideration unless a relief applies, or the lease was originally granted for a term of 7 years or more and the chargeable consideration for the surrender is £40,000 or more. Now, the SDLT calculator available on the HMRC website will help you scope the likely SDLT amount, but landlords should take accountancy or legal advice for the exact position. In the common scenario where the tenant pays the landlord to accept the surrender of the lease, a reverse premium, good news, no SDLT liability arises for either the landlord or the tenant. And where the tenant is required to make a break payment to the landlord, again, good news. There's no chargeable land transaction and no SDLT liability arises for either party. I should mention that there may be direct tax, income or corporation tax issues and capital allowances issues arising from a surrender, which are usually issues for accountants, not solicitors, to opine on. It's important to discuss with your accountants those tax implications if ending your lease early, as with every benefit comes tax consequences. That's all for part 2. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you all again soon.